As the race toward November's midterm election heats up, so does the Tea Party's role in it. I'm Cathy Lewis. We'll examine the Tea Party movement and its influence. Good evening, I'm Cathy Lewis. The Virginia Tea Party is gathered at this hour in Richmond for what's billed as a Freedom Lovers extravaganza. It's the capstone for the first day of the Tea Party's convention, which ends tomorrow with a keynote by conservative broadcaster Lou Dobbs. Tonight, we'll examine the impact of the Tea Party in Virginia and across the country with Dean Charles Dunn, who's the Distinguished Professor of Government at Regent University. Dr. Carol Pretlow is an Associate Political Science Professor at Norfolk State University. Kimball Payne is with the Daily Press, where he's a political reporter and Shad Plank columnist. Also with us, Bishop E.W. Jackson, who's a member of the Hampton Roads Tea Party. Thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bishop Jackson, I want to start with you because this is a little bit of a miracle of television kind of thing. You have a slot at the Tea Party convention.
Yes.
What will you be doing?
I'll be speaking. I'll be sort of setting the tone, getting things open, so to speak, inspiring and encouraging people to keep up the fight for freedom, and pointing out where I think we've gone wrong and the direction we're now trying to lead the country in.
And when you say where you think we've gone wrong, give me 10 seconds on where we've gone wrong.
Profligate, insane spending, everything but job creation by sucking all the energy out of the private economy and bringing it into the federal government, and frankly ignoring the will of the people.
One of the interesting things, Dean Dunn, and I take what Bishop Jackson is talking about here, and Newsweek just talked about this issue of the, I hear a lot of passion in his voice, right. This issue of the angry voter, the voter who's, to quote Newsweek, mad as hell and I'm going to vote. What role does anger play in this situation?
It plays a very important part. It's a mirror image of people. They're looking for someone who represents what they think. And if they're angry, for example, about the economy, angry about loss of job, angry about various other social and economic issues, they identify with those candidates. In this instance, there is a strong identification with the Tea Party.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in this Newsweek poll they said 74% of angry voters are more likely to support a candidate who expresses anger about the economy and jobs. And so there is this idea, Dr. Pretlow, that says that we are looking for something from our political leaders. We are looking for some level of passion as they address these issues. And that seems to have gotten more important rather than less.
Yeah, I think it is very, very important. But I think as they express that passion, they also have to focus in what is the replacement. And that's what concerns me. I don't mind the anger, and I don't mind the idea of a change of a specific policy, but I want to know what are the replacement areas? How do you stimulate the economy? Mm-hmm. How do you create more jobs? What are the essentials to doing that?
Yeah. And when you're looking at an election, anger speaks to motivation. Mm-hmm. Anger speaks to voter turnout in a big way, and I think that's why, I wouldn't even. Everyone's so balled up around the angry voter. I'm more worried about motivation. Who's really going to show up? Who's going to get their minivan and shuttle people that they agree with to the polls? And I think that's what's important.
Not going to show up. The youth voters who Obama and the Democratic Party relied on in the last election, and they are totally turned off by. Yes, they may be angry, and in fact, I had a student this afternoon talk about being unemployed, and so they're concerned about that, but they are turned off by attacks of both parties, so that turns them against either party.
Yeah. Do you think that younger people have the same idea about political leadership being connected to issues like job loss as voters seem to have, and as sort of all ages of voters seem to have in this election?
I don't think that they do. I think that the last election was in some ways a fluke, because I think young people got caught up in the mystique, the charisma, the rhetoric, the ideals of building this great new society, fundamentally transforming America. And I don't think they'd really thought through the implications of the particulars of those issues. And in fact, I would say probably that was indicative of the fact that a lot of Americans hadn't really thought through that.
That's a lot of them.
That's every presidential election, it seems like.
And a lot of them don't connect with the process for change. For example, when an issue comes before the Senate, well, do you know the rules? Are you familiar with the whole concept of filibuster? Don't totally blame the president, because there are some other politicians that are there and that you should be looking to. But I don't think Americans as a whole do that.
The other interesting thing, we were talking with Dr. Jim Cook earlier this week, who's a former president of Old Dominion University, and he's the one who's for 11 years done this State of the Region report. And he was talking about the fact that in this region, we are in some respects, I'll use my word, would be held hostage, I don't think that's the word that he used, to issues over which we have very little control. And so, Dean Dunn, as you think about the challenge of a political leader running for an office that's 2 years in duration, and really they have to start running the day after they're elected with a 2-year cycle, that seems to be a pretty daunting task with these long problems.
It is, and it requires a couple of things. One is the courage to speak with wisdom on issues, to educate the electorate. So much of what we're seeing now with regard to the angry voter and the angry leader of those angry voters, just short quips, getting people excited. But people need to understand it's going to be a long time. We didn't get into these problems overnight. It's going to take a long time. And I think we also have to add to this hope. If we look, for example, Harry Truman in 1948, very bad situation. He campaigned both negatively and positively. In fact, that famous slogan, the do-nothing Republican Congress. There was both the negative and the positive in that slogan. He had put out an agenda, called a special session of Congress, and knew the Republicans wouldn't act on it. And so the Democrats waltzed to victory, capturing control of the Congress, and he won re-election. So he had courage. He offered wisdom to the American people. He was speaking both negatively and positive. So right now, what we need are people who will offer hope and who will educate the people with wisdom about the situation.
I think what people are looking at, though, in terms of the long-term nature of these problems, and some of them are very long-term, is what is your vision for America? Is it a collectivist vision that sees America more as a collectivist society, or is it a vision of a society based on individual responsibility and initiative, helping one another where we need to, but keeping the government out of our lives? And I think those are two different visions. And if one person is moving in one direction, which I believe the president is moving in more the collectivist vision, and the American people don't like it, they don't care that it's not happening. They don't think it'll ever happen with that kind of approach.
There's another point here, building on what the bishop has said. That is this idea of American exceptionalism, that we're a city on a hill. That's been a part of our fabric from the beginning. What's happened? Almost every president has spoken of American exceptionalism, except for Jimmy Carter and Barack Obama. Ronald Reagan spoke about American exceptionalism more than any other president, though many presidents spoke about it a good bit. And herein we see that optimism that we are America. Thomas Jefferson spoke about this, and there was this hope that we as Americans can solve our problems. So
I don't think that's a fair critique. You're talking about a guy who ran on hope, and you're talking about a guy who said we can do it, we can. I think that's unfair. I mean, the idea that Americans aren't loved in all corners of the globe is fact. I mean, I'm sorry. No, I'm just saying that is fact, and people are so mad. Like, what do you mean America isn't the best, greatest nation in the history of the world? And it's like, take a deep breath. Our economy's down. We're fighting 2 wars. Yeah. Listen, we're not in our best day right now, and so maybe he's not the best cheerleader, but this is a guy who ran on hope.
But we don't have to go around the world apologizing to the world as if it's something
fundamental.
No, you put America up against any. This is part of where the anger comes from. You put America up against any other nation, and we don't have to apologize to anybody. And yes, if we have problems, we should resolve those problems among ourselves, not go around the world telling everybody how bad we are. Now, there may be people who think that's appropriate, but I think the average American says no.
And I don't know if it's so much. Go ahead, Dr. Pretlow. I don't know if it's so much an apology, but the recognition of ills and the acknowledgement. And we don't have to. The internet is there. The global television media network. So when you go abroad, you don't have to say a word. They are thinking or saying to you, "What happened when? And I'm thinking,
well, let's get Germany apologizing for World War II. Let's get France apologizing for their complicity with the Nazis. families. Let's get the Italians apologizing. I mean, you know, let's get the genocidal activity that goes on in Africa. Let's get some people together apologizing for that. I mean, I think part of what we're seeing is a resurgence of patriotism, because I think Americans are simply tired of being told that everything that's wrong in the world is wrong because of us.
You see, Bishop, I think what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I hear your passion in that. But the other piece of this is, and this I think is something that's come since, we're supposed to be talking about the Tea Party, we just went in a very different direction, folks, hang on. Since September 11th, I think there's been this great friction that's been building, because I think people who may not necessarily believe that America has done the right thing in every circumstance still love their country. They respect their country, they respect their leadership. They love where they live, or else they'd probably live in somewhere else. But I hear from those people quite often who are saying, you know, I don't want my patriotism to be questioned because I question the actions, or disagree with, in some cases, the actions of my government. It seems to me we've come to this moment, and I wonder, I guess, is part of the Tea Party movement, is that in part a reflection of that conversation?
Well, my government is fundamentally involved in many ways in abortion, which I'm determinedly opposed to, but I still love my country, and I don't have any problem expressing that. So I think people who raise that question may be saying something more about themselves, because I don't think there's any contradiction between knowing that your country is not perfect. I mean, I get up every Sunday and talk to people about the fact that we are not perfect and we need redemption. But on the other hand, we are, in my view, an American family, and we ought to be fundamentally proud of who we are and proud of what our country has done and what it's become.
So the idea that we can talk about our own family, but we don't want anybody else to, I mean,
I think that's my view, and I think a lot of people probably share that view.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to ask about this, because one of the things that, and we did promise a show on the Tea Party movement, so forgive that little detour there, but I think it is part of the conversation in a lot of respects. Yes. What do you think about that?
Well, the idea of American exceptionalism motivates people in the Tea Party. They think about the greatness of America. They think about presidents like Harry Truman, John F. Kennedy, or Franklin Roosevelt, all Democratic presidents, and how they articulated this idea of American exceptionalism. They see Ronald Reagan and how he articulated it, and they want to have that continued with a president who identifies with the history of American exceptionalism. You know, it's not to say that, you know, we're the best and the greatest, but we have...
Or that we're perfect.
Or that we're perfect. But we have pride and we have hope. And if we go back again to the Carter era, malaise, that was a word that stands out. And along came Ronald Reagan. It's mourning in America. A contrast here. And he identified...
And the other thing was more attractive and more hopeful.
That's correct. So hope, and this is where I would say to the Tea Party, be careful. You can play on anger, but you can only play so far on that. You're going to have to, like Ronald Reagan did, you've got to turn this to hope.
This is and we did print it out, the convention program here for the Tea Party convention, which is underway this weekend, by the way, in Richmond. And I just have to, and I know that you were not the one responsible for this, and I'm not asking you to be responsible for it, but we do see this a lot in the literature. Demand the liberal media stop the bias and tell the truth.
Well, you know,
where's the bias and what's not the truth?
I think that it is an absolute fact, and it's been determined. I mean, it's been settled by all kinds of polls and studies. There is a liberal bias in the media. Now, that's not to say that every reporter is biased, but it is to say that there is this liberal bias in the mainstream media, and those of us who are more traditional or conservative in our views often feel that our words are twisted, or what we stand for. I spoke at a Tea Party group, and the reporter wrote the story. He didn't write about what I said. He said there was only one problem with the whole thing. Bishop Jackson and his wife were the only two black people there. Well, I mean, is that really the story, or is that their particular bias toward the story? Rather than telling the story of people coming together and the positive message that was put out, he would rather try to make it a racial issue. So I think that's not, in our view, that's not the truth.
Yeah, but the most powerful cable news company is Fox News. So, I mean, I understand that they're...
Which is attacked all the time by the administration and by other media as being illegitimate, simply because they offer balance.
There's the liberal media. I mean, I get the I can write a brief this long wrong. And I get an email telling me that my commie pinko self needs to, you know, go back to Russia. And I'm like, I was writing a brief about a bake sale. I mean, there's certain places. I'm not doubting. Listen, I understand what you're getting at. I think that the idea that the conversation is somehow stilted and slanted, I think you just have to look at the individual conversation. You have to look at the individual players. I mean, I think there are people out there, they're bad apples spoil the bunch. I mean, I'm sure you're mad about the people that do dumb things in the name of the Tea Party. And I think anyone is correct to call those people out for doing things like that. Anyone's correct for calling the other side out on it. But you got to take it with a grain of salt, and you have to look at individuals.
Let's look at the numbers, because there's some very interesting polling numbers, and you reported on this, Kimball. The polling numbers in terms of the Tea Party impact in the 2nd District, one of the most closely watched races in the country.
Yeah, well, you got Glenn Nye is the incumbent, Scott Ridgell's the Republican, and Kenny Golden's the independent, former chair of the GOP, and the Hill, which is a prominent Washington paper, did a poll of 12 freshman Democrats who were swept in with the Barack Obama wave in 2008, and it went in and it polled on the races, and then it polled on the Tea Party as well. And what they found, especially in the 2nd District, was I think it was 44% of independents said that they would think less of a candidate if they were involved with the Tea Party, while only about 19 independents said they would think more favorably. Now, in general, across the whole spectrum, it was about 38 to 38 even split for like the Tea Party, dislike the Tea Party. And it was just interesting numbers to me, because I wasn't sure where the movement was pulling from. Was it with independents, Republicans? But I mean, it's interesting numbers, and it's interesting for Glenn Nye and Scott Ridgell.
I think part of that is the sociological and cultural elements that go into these polls, because it depends on who you're polling as to what. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, the Tea Party has a very negative image in a certain group of people, and that's the African American community. And it has a negative pull in among young people that I'm teaching. They say, oh, the Tea Party, and they say, oh, they're automatically biased. Again, this is part of maybe our culture, that we don't want to look beyond the headlines or beyond certain elements.
I don't think you get many positive stories in the mainstream media about the Tea Party. When I've been asked about that, I say, well, look, maybe if the media stops telling people that the Tea Party is racist and against them, maybe people would open up and begin to realize these are a fine group of Americans who just care about their country.
Yeah, but when you see those signs that, I mean, and I don't, and there are some issues that I agree about, you know, on the Tea Party with the Tea Party on, but when you see signs that are racially biased and that are very negative.
Very few, and that's all been cleaned up. Anybody who brings that stuff, they've got to go. The Tea Party's made itself clear. We're not going to have that in anything that we're doing. I think absolutely. I mean, I think that's already been done. Look, the Tea Party movement is not interested in racial division. In fact, what we really want to do is bring the country together.
But see, this, I think, Dean Dunn, is very interesting, because this is really the challenge for a lot of groups that catch fire quickly, isn't it? The folk who want to sort of be on the coattails, and the challenge to the organization to say, we're this, but we're not that.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it seems like that's a big challenge.
The Tea Party and all the like movements throughout American history, they're like wildfire. They're here today and gone tomorrow. They have impact, and we need to be thankful for them, because they identify issues that concern Americans. The Tea Party has identified issues that a substantial segment of the American populace has an interest in. Wisdom should persuade Barack Obama, the Republican Party, the Republican establishment, hey, what is this? We're missing something here. So whether you look at, go back before the Civil War, local focus, barn burners, anti-Masonic, Know-Nothing Party, on up through the populists, the progressives, and you had the Dixiecrats with Strom Thurmond, you had George Wallace and Ross Perot. They have a day in the sun. The Tea Party will have its day in the sun. It's very important, and we need to be thankful for it.
But ridiculing them only feeds the anger that you've identified.
You make them bigger.
So do you
Yes.
think their candidates are going to be largely successful in terms of being elected? Are they going to be able to say, okay, we're going to take this race from the Republican Party and we are going to be the new chiefs in charge?
Good question, Carol. All the data, well, especially since the primary season ended, survey after survey show that the Republican Party will win a landslide. I just wrote an op-ed column saying, well, that's likely to be true unless the Democrats and President Obama can pull off something like Harry Truman did. If they do that, or if they can paint the Republican candidates as extremists. And to your point, there are the extremist candidates that Republicans have nominated in Delaware, for example, and in Nevada. Now, if those candidates win, and it looks like a couple of them will, latest poll in Nevada shows angle up over Reed, then we will see the Tea Party get a bigger toehold in the Republican Party, moving the center of gravity of power in the Republican Party farther to the right. So there's a big question here, the outcome of this election. Will we see Barack Obama learning from Bill Clinton and move to the center, or will we see him just stay far left?
I don't see Christine O'Donnell in Delaware as an extremist. Now, she is very conservative, but a lot of people see Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic leadership as very, very extreme far left, and this is in part a reaction to that, to try to bring the country back to the center-right country that it is. So I think these candidates will win.
Kimball, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and you look those races aside, you look at how the Tea Party is trying to work here in Hampton Roads, and you talk about them. You know, during the primary season, they were not happy with Scott Ridgell, the sort of establishment candidate, and they made no bones about it. They endorsed somebody else. They came out against him. Then they worked over the summer to come up with something, and he signed the pledge. So you're seeing it. I mean, it's very much a tapestry, and you're seeing it. You know, different places bring different
I think the second is going to be a very interesting race from a national perspective, not for the reasons we've necessarily been talking about, but for what you were saying, Dr. Dunn, about giving some wisdom or some guidance in terms of, okay, how is this thing going to fall? How are people responding to it? What makes sense then as a response?
Well, and you look at what Carol pointed out with the young people and minorities being upset with the Tea Party. You look at those two groups; those are two of the worst turnouts in midterm elections.
Right.
Those groups never show up in off-year elections in any force.
What would get them to show up, though? I mean, if you're talking about change and going the Tea Party route, how would them going that? How would they get to there?
That's a question we have to ask another day. Because we are out of time. It's a great question, though. Maybe we should start there next time. I think it's going to be a very, very interesting race to watch, and the convention continues through the weekend. And in fact, that's exactly correct. We should have talked about that. That all three of the 2nd District congressional candidates will be debating at the convention
Saturday morning,
and Kimball Payne will be there. That's tomorrow morning, and so that will be very interesting to see how that too will, I think, inform just a bit of this. And then we'll have to get some folks back later on to talk about what the outgrowth of that should be, and then what the response is to be.
Parade for anybody.
Well, thanks to all of you for being with us today. I really appreciate it. Before we leave you tonight, how many times have you seen something in Hampton Roads and said, I wish I had a camera? Tonight was one of those moments for me. Well, this weekend there will be hundreds of photographers throughout Hampton Roads, all ages, all skill levels, using their cameras to capture random acts of kindness. It's called Shoot for Good, and it's the brainchild of some photojournalists who believe that images can inspire and initiate change. One of the project's creators is Virginian pilot photojournalist Stephen Katz.
The most important thing is that people go out and just take this opportunity to recognize acts of kindness, good deeds, the good things that nonprofits and volunteers do in Hampton Roads.
Personally for me, I get tired of seeing the media doing all sad stories, bad stories about crime and issues in our area, and I know there's a lot of good that goes on. So for me, I think it's important to see the good and to get people out in their communities helping and working with the nonprofits and just helping their neighbors.
And once nonprofits started signing up on the bulletin board, and it gave the project some legitimacy. And so Hope House Edmark, the Norfolk and Virginia Beach SPCAs were, early on jumped on board, which I think helped influence others to see the value that this work will have for the organizations. The website is chock full of information. There's a little introductory video on the home page that explains the project. We hope that you'll have a camera slung over your shoulder or a camera phone tucked in your pocket, and you witness somebody doing something good.
We had so many people that went onto it to see what we were doing that it actually crashed, and we had to get a larger website. And then we ended up getting a Facebook site, and that's now up to over 1,400 people.
Basically, the clock starts at 12:01 Saturday morning, and it runs till midnight. So it's a 24-hour project. It's designed to be a 24-hour snapshot of the kindness, the benevolence of Hampton Roads. We'll have a gallery on the website that will be updated in near real time. When you upload your photograph, it's not going to instantly show up on the website, because we are going to monitor to a certain extent some of the photographs uploaded, because we just want to make sure that everything is PG rated and good for general consumption. We really, really want a cross-section of folks to participate. We want young folks, we want students, we want elderly folks, we want professionals, amateurs, anybody and everybody who can press a button. Because that way we really get to see what people recognize as good in their community. And I think that's part of the magic that's gonna play out when we look back at this snapshot.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time for another look at what matters.